Let's talk erectile dysfunction, let's talk sexual performance, let's talk deepened intimacy, let's talk sexual connection. Let's go to the places that are sometimes pretty uncomfortable, particularly when it comes to sexual expression. So I received a question from a follower and I just want to read this to you. It's a short question. Let's just deep dive straight in. So I have a question. I've been with my partner for a while now, on and off. I believe he loves me, but when we are intimate, he rarely reaches orgasm. This makes me feel very insecure, feeling that I am not enough for him. I'm not sure if it has to do with his ED problem, but I'm afraid to ask. So let's break this down as best we can. Firstly, communication isn't everything in relationship, and communication is very important in life. Whether it's verbal or non-verbal, whether it's more conscious or unconscious. Communication is how we connect, it's how we understand each other. The quality of our communication comes down to how confident we are in ourselves, how secure we are in our own being. I feel in this particular situation, there are two fairly potentially, and I can't make assumptions of why he's not orgasming. I can't make that assumption, or rather, I think what she means is ejaculating, because there's a difference between orgasm and ejaculation. I think what she's referring to is ejaculation. I can't make an assumption as to why he's not, but I can provide some reasons as to perhaps why he isn't. Now, they could both be two very insecure people that lack confidence, self-belief, and self-worth. Their sense of self is low. Why is that? Could be for various reasons. In my experience working with thousands and thousands of people, both individually and in groups, I've found that and there's such a large body of research into this as well. I have found and I've discovered that most of our issues as adults stem from our childhood, during our developmental years. And so we've picked up maladaptive coping strategies that once kept us alive, psychological, emotional coping strategies, sometimes physical, that kept us alive and helped us understand and navigate the world as children, that we continue to use as adults that don't really serve the dynamics of our relationships. And it causes issues. And so these habitual patterns actually are a detriment to us forging deeper friendships and commitments and intimacy in relationship, as particularly relationship that is meaningful to us, that's important to us. So the fact that she's afraid to ask, that's an issue. We have to be able to have these deeper conversations, especially if we're hurting, especially if we are curious, particularly if our needs are not being met. We have to learn how to communicate that, not in a way that projects our pain onto someone else or blames or shames someone else, but rather just openly speaks to our feelings. Now, that may be really challenging when we feel very fearful about being vulnerable, about being open with who we are and where we are, about speaking about something that may open us up for humiliation or rejection or abandonment. And so therefore we have to go back into ourselves and quote unquote work on our stuff, work on the stuff that's hindering us from living a fuller life, from hindering us from expressing more fully in the world and being more present and more open and more loving and more dynamic and fluid in the world. And so that's very, very important. Now, does he have an ED problem? It seems that he does, because she's mentioned that he has specifically erectile dysfunction. So it's not just a matter of not ejaculating, but it's also a matter of there's a disconnection from his sex organ and his sexuality or the sexual energy. Why could that be? He may be thinking deeply about his life. He may not be in a healthy place psychologically or emotionally. He may be distressed. He may feel that he has a lot of pressure in his world. And so sexuality and sexual union is something that requires rawness and openness and vulnerability and presence. And if our minds are massively distracted with quote unquote survival, with being in a place that is really challenging for us, and we can't take our minds off that, sexual performance, for lack of a better term, or even just being present to another human being in that vulnerable state is deeply overwhelming. And so it's not so much a matter that he doesn't want to have pleasure or he doesn't want to experience joy and connection with his partner. Maybe he truly doesn't. Maybe he cannot speak to that. Maybe his voice is muted. It's stunted because, again, of past conditioning, of a habit he's developed around how he expresses his truth. Maybe he would speak his truth as a child. And this is for anyone and everyone. Maybe you've spoken your truth as a child and it's been rejected by a parental figure, a primary caregiver, your father or your mother. I remember in my childhood when I would express pain or even just have a question about life, it was often, not always, but often met with disdain. It was often met with, I'm being a burden. I would be yelled at or screamed at or even hit. I would be ignored, namely by my father. So I developed this habit of keeping to myself and not asking questions, but trying to figure out things on my own, which became internally and externally very frustrating. And so I needed an outlet. And so my outlet was being frustrated against the world, being angry at the world, pushing back at the world, because I internalized it for so long. So I really went on a pendulum because I had a volatile upbringing. My experience was massive passivity and then massive outbursts of just being angry at the world and projecting outwardly, right? And so maybe this young man, or this man, I don't know how old he is, but maybe this man, he's stuck in that place of just not being able to communicate. So, we look at sexual performance and erectile dysfunction, and sometimes it's a physiological thing. More often than not, it's psychologically related, it's stress related. So maybe he's bringing massive amounts of his past into his present. The fact that they're not able to communicate that and they're sort of just sweeping it under the rug. I'm just going to go back here. They're in an on and off relationship. So there's a lack of certainty and expression with what their needs are. It doesn't seem that I don't want to assume too much, but it doesn't seem that she's too, I've been with my partner for a while now, on and off. It doesn't seem she's too content with this situation. That's the feeling I get. I believe he loves me, not even knowing the level of affection or intimacy that you're sharing with your partner. Yes, at the beginning of a relationship and throughout a relationship, attraction dynamics play a role. And sometimes it's really beautiful to have a mystery, especially the feminine. See, the feminine is the mystery, and she also yearns for the mystery outside of herself. So she wants the mysterious man, whether it's at the beginning of the relationship or during or years into the relationship. So having mystery as a man is very important. It's something that the feminine recognizes that is deep within her core essence and recognizes outside of her. And having that mystery is important. But if your partner is sincerely concerned about, I don't know if he loves me, and there's a fear around that, that's not healthy. The mystery is healthy, but not when there's massive amounts of fear. Uncertainty in a man, the mystery is healthy, but not when there's massive amounts of uncertainty. And so there's something more than just erectile dysfunction and sexual performance here. And so the fact that this woman as well, we can't not address the fact that she's not feeling insecure and she's not feeling enough. And is she perpetuating that? And are there unconscious, unresolved woundings feeding into each other? And so her insecurity about her performance, is it feeding into his insecurity about his performance? Because we're never really present then. Are they present when they're having sex, when they're making love, when they're connecting intimately? Are they actually really present? Are they present and open to each other when they're thinking about, I need to do well here, I need to perform? And so there are these massive distractions. Maybe he doesn't feel good about himself. Maybe his sense of self-worth is very low. Maybe he's had really negative experiences with sexual partners in the past, and maybe she has too. The point about this is that we have to work on our own stuff as individuals, and we have to communicate that to our partners to some degree, meet them to the level that they're at, and meet ourselves where we are at as well. Sweeping things under the rug, it does not help. Ignoring and suppressing and avoiding and numbing like we often do as human beings, it's not an effective, sustainable, long-term strategy. In the interim, it can work depending on your situation. But long-term, especially when you're bonding and you're continually growing together, it doesn't help. So I hope that's shone some light on the situation. Power and blessings to you. I'll see you again soon.